She needs fresh napkins, Andrea said, not even looking up. These have water spots. I'd ironed those napkins myself that morning. Then Dad actually smiled at her. That's what I love about you, he beamed. That was the second she erased my mother. The first was when he lifted his wine glass and said, "Serve my bride," in front of 30 guests. In the house I'd maintained. On the plates I'd polished. And she wasn't done. The next morning, she texted me a task list, dry cleaning, errands, recipes, like I was staff. She didn't know I knew every ledger, every deed, every legal document in this house. She didn't know I had her entire pattern, certified and time-stamped. So when I served her, I didn't bring wine. I brought consequences. And she never saw it coming. Now you tell me, what do you do when your own father makes you the help? My name is Jason Delaney, and I'm 45 years old. Every morning, I wake before dawn to manage the accounts of my father Richard's estate, a legacy that grew from a humble auto shop into acres of pristine grounds. The steam from my coffee curls over decades of receipts that still carry traces of motor oil. While outside, I tend to my late mother Sarah's garden, not from joy anymore, but pure duty. My father's new wife Andrea, barely older than me, hasn't stopped smirking since their wedding night, treating our family home like her personal shopping mall. What she doesn't realize is that I know every ledger entry, every authorization code, and exactly where each dollar of my father's fortune sleeps. A smile can bankrupt a legacy overnight. But let me start from the beginning. 2 weeks after the wedding, Dad hosted one of his famous dinner parties. You know the type. Crystal glasses catching candlelight, silver platters gleaming like mirrors, and enough food to feed half the neighborhood. I'd helped organize these gatherings since Mom passed, keeping everything running smoothly from behind the scenes. But something felt different that night. The autumn air drifted through the dining room windows, carrying the scent of Mom's roses, the ones I still tended every morning. Andrea, my new stepmother, sat at the head of the table where Mom used to sit, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the mahogany. Have you ever watched someone measure a space they plan to own? That's exactly what she was doing. I was arranging the place settings, muscle memory from years of helping Mom, when Dad cleared his throat. "Jason," he said, lifting his empty crystal glass. "Serve my bride." My hands froze mid-motion. The room seemed to tilt sideways as Andrea's lips curved into that familiar smirk. She extended her own glass, the diamond on her finger catching the light like a warning beacon. "Of course," I managed, my voice steady despite the heat crawling up my neck. The crystal made a soft scraping sound as I collected their glasses, painfully aware of the guests' sideways glances and poorly concealed whispers. In the kitchen, the overhead lamps beat down like interrogation lights. Each step felt mechanical as I filled their glasses with the expensive Cabernet Andrea had specially selected for the evening. The bottle's label bore the same date as my own birth year, a detail that didn't escape my notice. Back in the dining room, forks clattered against china as I set down their drinks. "Perfect timing," Andrea purred, not even looking up. "We'll need fresh napkins too, Jason. These have water spots." Dad beamed at her like she'd just solved world hunger. "Always an eye for detail, sweetheart. That's what I love about you." I retreated to the kitchen again, counting breaths like Mom taught me during thunderstorms. The napkins were spotless. I'd pressed them myself that morning, but I replaced them anyway. Better to pick my battles. Later, after the guests had gone, I tried catching Dad alone in his study. "About tonight," I started, but he cut me off with a wave. "Andrea's bringing some much-needed standards to this house," he said, shuffling papers on his desk. "You could learn a thing or two from her organizational skills." My jaw clenched. Organizational skills? I'd managed his books for 20 years, turned his auto shop receipts into a fortune. But before I could remind him, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Andrea, a morning task list that scrolled on forever. Laundry, specific instructions for water temperature and fabric softener. Errands, including picking up her dry cleaning across town, and detailed catering requirements for an upcoming ladies' night she was hosting. Standing in the dark pantry, wiping her wine-red lipstick from crystal glasses, I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The task list glowed accusingly on my phone screen. Each item another brick in the wall she was building between Dad and me. I slipped the phone into my pocket and grabbed the bottle of Cabernet, my birth-year wine, studying the label in the dim light. 20 years of managing accounts had taught me one thing. Every change leaves a paper trail. And if Andrea thought she could rewrite our family's story without consequences, she had seriously miscalculated. The women at Mom's garden club used to say you could measure a person's character by how they treated those they thought beneath them. Well, Andrea had just shown her hand. Now it was time to start measuring every move she made. I finished polishing the last glass, its surface now clear enough to reflect the determination in my eyes. Tomorrow would bring her errands and demands. But tonight, I had ledgers to review. The next 7 days felt like being trapped in some twisted reality show where I played both butler and chauffeur. Andrea's demands arrived in perfectly timed text messages, each one more presumptuous than the last. You know how a frog won't jump out of slowly heating water? That's exactly what she was doing to me. Monday morning started with dry cleaning. Not just pickup, but specific instructions about hangers and pressing techniques. Make sure they use the wooden hangers, her text read, and tell Maurice to double starch the collars, as if I didn't have actual accounting work to do. By Tuesday, I was driving her to some fancy salon across town. "Jason, dear," she called from the back seat, scrolling through her phone. "Circle the block until I'm done. Parking's such a hassle. 3 hours. I circled for 3 hours while quarterly reports sat untouched on my desk. Wednesday brought the ladies' night prep list. Andrea had invited what she called her inner circle, 6 women I'd never met who apparently needed imported cheese and hand-piped chocolate truffles. I spent the afternoon arranging canapé trays while she supervised from Mom's favorite armchair, legs crossed like she was posing for a magazine spread. "The cucumber squares need to be uniform," she said, not even looking up from her phone. "Mrs. Henderson has very particular tastes." I set down the knife. "Andrea, I need to finish the monthly reconciliation." "Jason," Dad's voice cut through the room. He stood in the doorway, frowning. "Your stepmother is trying to elevate our entertaining standards. Don't be ungrateful." Ungrateful. The word hit like a slap. I'd spent 20 years growing his wealth, and now I was ungrateful for questioning appetizer geometry. Thursday, I watched Andrea parade her friends through Mom's sitting room like it was an open house. "We'll replace these dated curtains," she announced, running her fingers along Mom's hand-sewn drapes. "And that old writing desk has to go." Perfect spot for my meditation corner. I buried myself in receipts that afternoon, trying to drown my anger in numbers, but the figures only stoked my concern. Andrea's household upgrades were bleeding money. Imported Italian linens, custom meditation cushions, private yoga sessions billed as estate wellness consulting. Every reimbursement request came with Dad's signature, each one larger than the last. "Your stepmother knows how to run things efficiently," Dad said when I tried showing him the totals. That word, run, clanged in my head like a prison gate closing. The estate wasn't being run. It was being ransacked in silk gloves. Friday afternoon, I was elbow-deep in silverware polishing when a courier arrived. The envelope he carried was thick, marked legal in bold letters. Andrea intercepted it before I could get a closer look, but I caught the law firm's letterhead. Brightman and Associates. Estate planning. My stomach twisted as she tucked the envelope into the office credenza, her movements quick and practiced. She didn't know I'd spent my childhood watching Dad hide Christmas presents in that same drawer. Didn't know I could recognize the key on his ring from 20 paces. That night, after their bedroom light clicked off, I sat in the dark kitchen, nursing cold coffee. The house creaked its familiar midnight symphony. The hum of the wine fridge. The tick of Mom's old grandfather clock. For the first time in years, those comfortable sounds felt like a countdown. I thought about that legal envelope sitting in the credenza, about Andrea's smirk when she'd locked the drawer, about Dad's signature appearing on larger and larger checks. 20 years of financial management had taught me to trust patterns, and this pattern screamed trouble. The grandfather clock struck 12, each chime echoing through the empty halls. I knew Dad's key ring hung by the garage door, knew exactly which key would open that credenza, knew I had maybe 2 hours before Andrea's beauty sleep ended with her usual midnight snack run. My coffee cup clinked softly in its saucer. Time to find out what kind of legal papers were worth hiding from the family accountant. The grandfather clock's midnight toll faded into silence. I waited another 20 minutes, listening to the house settle, before easing out of my chair. The kitchen tiles felt cool through my socks as I crept toward the garage entrance where Dad's keys hung. You know that feeling when you're doing something you shouldn't? How every tiny sound seems amplified? The key ring clinked like cymbals when I lifted it, and the hallway floorboards might as well have been playing a symphony. But I'd walked these floors since I was 5. I knew exactly where to step to stay quiet. The office still smelled like Andrea's perfume, something expensive and suffocating that made me think of department store cosmetic counters. Moonlight filtered through the windows, casting weird shadows across Dad's desk. For a second, I could have sworn I saw Mom sitting there, going through invoices with her reading glasses perched on her nose. The vision faded as quick as it came. The credenza key slid in smooth as butter. I'd watched Dad work this lock thousands of times, hiding Christmas presents, important papers, that bottle of scotch he broke out for special occasions. The drawer rolled open with barely a whisper. The legal envelope sat right on top, pristine white against the drawer's dark wood. My hands shook a little as I eased out the contents. Standard letterhead from Brightman and Associates, followed by page after page of dense legal text. But it was the bold heading that stopped my heart. Durable power of attorney. I spread the papers across Dad's desk, using my phone's flashlight to scan the terms. Andrea's name jumped out everywhere. Appointed agent, full financial authority, immediate effect. My throat went dry. With these forms, she could access every account, sign every check, make any financial decision she wanted. The whole estate's cash flow could bypass me completely. The signatures at the bottom looked rushed, almost sloppy. I remembered the champagne bottles from last week's celebration dinner. Now I knew what they'd been celebrating. I photographed every page, noting account numbers and authorization codes I'd need later. The whole time, my pulse pounded so loud I was sure it would wake them. Just as I was sliding the papers back into the envelope, a floorboard creaked overhead. I froze, holding my breath, but it was just the house settling. Still, I locked everything away double quick and returned Dad's keys. No sense pushing my luck. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through implications. By sunrise, I was nursing my third coffee at the breakfast table, waiting. Dad shuffled in around 7, making his usual beeline for the coffee pot. "Dad, we need to talk about the power of attorney forms." He didn't even look surprised. "You've been snooping. I've been protecting our interests for 20 years. Why would you give her that kind of control? Andrea understands modern finance." He stirred cream into his coffee with sharp little clinks. "She's organizing things efficiently. She's organizing herself into total control of your accounts. That's enough." His tone went hard. "Stop interfering with my wife's efforts to streamline our estate." "Dad," I said, "enough, Jason." The rest of breakfast passed in silence. I pushed eggs around my plate while Dad read his paper, the wall between us thick enough to stop bullets. When Andrea floated in around 9, all silk robe and morning-fresh makeup, he actually smiled. Later that afternoon, I was heading to my office when voices drifted from the study. I shouldn't have stopped. Shouldn't have moved closer, but something in their tone made my feet root to the carpet. "The accounts are so complicated," Andrea was saying, her voice honey-sweet. "All these separate holdings, these old vendor contracts." "What do you suggest?" Dad asked. "Just some streamlining, darling. Consolidating assets, updating beneficiaries, making things simpler." Dad chuckled. That warm, relieved sound he used to make when Mom handled problems for him. "You always know best." I pressed my ear closer to the door, barely breathing. Their voices dropped lower, but one word floated through clear as crystal. "Will." My stomach dropped to my shoes. That single syllable sparked against the velvet darkness of my fears, like a matchhead catching fire. I couldn't just walk away, not with that word, "will," hanging in the air like smoke. There was an old wooden chair in the hallway, the one Mom used to rest on while arranging flowers. I eased it against the study wall, holding my breath when it scraped the baseboard. "The timing needs to be perfect," Andrea was saying. Her voice carried that sugary tone she used when leading Dad somewhere. "We can't leave any loose ends." "What's your timeline?" Dad asked. "We'll rewrite the will as soon as the notary is free." She paused, and I could practically see her practiced smile. "It's all about protecting what you've built, darling. Making sure everything's properly secured." The taste of copper flooded my mouth. I'd been biting my cheek without realizing it. My hands gripped the chair's worn arms, feeling the smooth spots where Mom's rings had polished the wood over decades. I eased away from the wall, mind racing. They could schedule a notary any time, could update the will before I even knew what hit me. But I still had one advantage they couldn't touch: 20 years of meticulous record-keeping. Every transfer, every gift, every questionable movement of money. It was all documented in our systems. Remember those old episodes of Columbo? The ones where the killer thinks they've covered everything, but there's always one detail they missed? That's what I was counting on. Andrea might have Dad wrapped around her finger, but she couldn't erase 2 decades of transaction histories. Back in my office, I powered up my laptop. The familiar hum usually calmed my nerves, but tonight it just ramped up my pulse. I needed to pull everything: bank records, gift logs, property transfers, anything that could prove Andrea wasn't acting in Dad's best interest. The bank portal loaded, familiar as my own reflection. I typed in my credentials, fingers moving on autopilot after thousands of logins. The screen flickered. Access denied. I frowned, checked my caps lock, and tried again. Same result. Third try, typing each character with deliberate precision. Access denied. Account locked. The blood drained from my face. She'd already locked me out of our banking system. 20 years of managing these accounts, and now I couldn't even see the balances. Fine. Plan B. I pulled up the county recorder of deeds website. Property records were public. She couldn't block those. The search loaded, showing our estate's familiar plot lines. But something was off. The ownership structure had changed, showing a recent update to some kind of trust variation. And there at the bottom, authorizing everything, was Andrea's flowing signature. My throat closed up. She wasn't just changing access. She was restructuring our entire property holdings, moving pieces I'd spent years organizing into configurations I couldn't even follow. The grandfather clock in the hall started chiming midnight, each deep tone like a hammer to my chest. I shut the laptop, not trusting myself to look at any more tonight. The old house creaked around me, settling into its foundations just like it had every night of my life. But now those familiar sounds felt hollow, like the place was already slipping away. I set my phone alarm for 5 a.m. First light, I'd start a full audit. Every paper record, every archived statement, every deed and document I could get my hands on. Andrea might control the digital keys, but there were still boxes of hard copies in the basement. And unlike some people, paper trails don't lie. Leaning back in my chair, I caught a whiff of Mom's garden through the window. Late roses mixing with early autumn leaves. She taught me about keeping records, about protecting what matters. Details are your friends, she used to say while sorting receipts. They tell the real story, if you know how to listen. Well, Mom, I thought. Tomorrow we'll see what stories these details have to tell. The smell of fresh coffee couldn't mask the musty basement air as I hauled another banker's box onto the folding table. Dawn was just breaking through the narrow windows, casting long shadows across stacks of archived records. You know that saying about saving everything? Mom had lived by it, and I'd kept up the habit. Now, I was banking on those pack-rat tendencies to save our legacy. I'd been at it since 5 a.m., fueled by black coffee and that hollow ache in your gut when you know you're running out of options. The first box held vendor ledgers from the past 3 years. Every maintenance bill, every landscaping invoice, all meticulously filed. I spread them across the table like playing cards, looking for patterns Andrea might have missed. My coffee went cold while I cross-referenced insurance riders on Mom's jewelry collection. The policies were still active, but the beneficiary information had been updated last month. No surprise who was listed now. I rubbed my eyes, feeling grit from lack of sleep. The basement's fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unforgiving, kind of like my chances. Around 8, I tried accessing the bank records again through our archived statement portal. Same story. Permissions changed, access denied. Even the transaction histories I should have been able to see were locked behind new security protocols. 20 years of managing these accounts, and suddenly, I was locked out like some random stranger. Have you ever watched someone systematically dismantle something you've spent your whole life building? That's what these papers were showing me. Every file I opened, every document I checked, revealed another piece of control quietly transferred to Andrea's authority. The county recorder's site confirmed what I'd seen last night. But now I had time to really study the changes. The property deed modifications weren't just simple transfers. She'd restructured everything under a managed trust, with herself as primary trustee. Dad's signature was there, but it looked shaky, like he'd signed without reading the fine print. Or maybe he had read it and just didn't care anymore. I started listing potential pressure points in my notebook, anything we could use as leverage, but with each item I wrote down, my stomach sank further. The paper trail I'd been counting on was now working against me. Every transaction, every transfer, every change carried Andrea's newly authorized signature. She hadn't just taken control. She'd done it legally, with Dad's blessing and a notary's stamp. The afternoon sun was streaming through those basement windows when I heard laughter from the patio above. Andrea's voice carried down clearly as she entertained her friends, probably the same crowd she'd been parading through Mom's sitting room lately. Their heels clicked on the flagstones while they discussed renovation plans like they already owned the place. I shut my laptop harder than I meant to, the sound echoing off concrete walls. The careful leverage I'd been counting on, all those years of detailed record-keeping. It was worthless now. Andrea hadn't just outmaneuvered me. She'd erased months of careful control with a few strategic signatures. My coffee cup still sat there, stone cold now. Mom had given me that cup, one of those silly office gifts with "World's Most Organized Son" printed on it. She'd known how much I loved putting numbers in their proper places, making everything balance out clean and fair. The memory of her standing in this same basement, teaching me her filing system, hit me like a physical ache. I started packing the boxes back up, each manila folder another nail in the coffin of my original plan. The musty paper smell mixed with coffee and desperation as I filed away proof of my own powerlessness. Upstairs, Andrea's laughter rang out again, probably at some joke about redecorating Mom's garden. My hands shook as I replaced the last lid, but not from caffeine. I caught Dad alone in his study the next morning, clutching printouts of the deed transfers like they were lottery tickets. My hands were steady. Funny how desperation can do that to you. "Dad, we need to talk about these property adjustments. Have you seen what she's doing?" He barely glanced up from his paper. "Jason, don't start being dramatic. Andrea's streamlining things." "Streamlining?" "She's transferred everything into a trust she controls." I spread the documents across his desk, pointing at highlighted sections. "You know that moment when you're explaining something obvious, and you can feel the other person already shutting down? That's what I was getting. Son, I'm tired of your paranoia. Andrea understands modern estate management." He folded his newspaper with that crisp snap he always used when ending conversations. "She's bringing efficiency to systems you've kept stuck in the 1990s. Before I could respond, Andrea's heels clicked down the hallway. She breezed in wearing Mom's sapphire necklace, the one Mom had worn on special occasions, always touching it like it held memories instead of gems. Andrea dangled the matching earrings, letting them catch the morning light. "Richard, honey, look what I found in that old jewelry box." She smiled like a cat with cream. "I've documented it as a household appreciation gift. Very properly done." She waved a printed receipt, probably generated from that accounting access I'd lost. My throat closed up. Those sapphires had been Mom's 20th anniversary present. I remembered Dad fastening them around her neck at her last Christmas dinner, both of them grinning like teenagers. "Beautiful choice, dear." Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. "That level of organization is exactly what I mean, Jason. Andrea understands proper documentation." The shame hit me then, hot and sharp behind my ribs. This wasn't just about control anymore. It was about watching Dad rewrite every memory, every principle he'd taught me, just to avoid admitting what was happening. He'd turned respect into a commodity, something you earned by playing along with whatever Andrea wanted. I walked out before either of them could see my face. Mom's jewelry box sat open in her old room. Velvet linings empty now. I touched the spots where those sapphires used to rest. Remembered how carefully Mom had shown me each piece, telling me the stories behind them. "Always protect what matters," she'd said. "But what do you protect when the guardians surrender?" The garden drew me out as dusk settled, like it always did when things got too heavy inside. I'd kept Mom's roses, alive through 3 seasons now, pruning and feeding exactly like she'd taught me. The motion sensor lights clicked on as I passed, throwing sharp shadows across her favorite bench. Laughter rolled out from the dining room windows. Andrea's friends again, probably planning more improvements to Mom's carefully planned spaces. Their voices carried across the lawn, discussing paint schemes and contractor quotes like they were doing us all a favor. I gripped the old fence post where Dad used to measure my height as a kid, feeling splinters catch at my palms. The whole property smelled faintly of motor oil. You never really get that out of the soil around a mechanic's house. Dad used to say that smell meant honest work, meant building something real. Now it just reminded me of everything slipping away. Standing there in the growing dark, I let myself consider walking away from all of it. The house, the books, the whole suffocating mess. I could be gone before sunrise, find some corporate accounting job where ledgers didn't hold family histories. My fingers dug deeper into the weathered wood as I pictured it. Empty desk, cleared hard drive. Nothing left to fight for or lose. The night air carried a hint of Mom's roses, still blooming despite everything. 20 years of balance sheets and careful records felt like chains now, anchoring me to a place where numbers couldn't protect what mattered anymore. I closed my eyes, breathing in that mix of oil and roses, so close to choosing disappearance over defeat. You ever have one of those moments when you're digging through old boxes and find exactly what you didn't know you needed? That's what happened when I was searching the garage that night, hunting through Dad's ancient filing system. Really just a stack of shoeboxes and manila envelopes stuffed in his '85 Buick's glove box. I was looking for anything with dates or signatures, but what I found was an envelope marked Ray Emergency in Mom's careful handwriting. Inside was a number, barely legible after years of sitting in that humid garage. The paper felt fragile, like it might crumble along with my last shot at fixing this mess. Uncle Ray, Dad's younger brother. They'd had some falling out years ago over the business, something about expansion plans and risk assessment. Ray had wanted to grow slower. Dad wanted to push harder. Classic brother stuff that turned into radio silence. But Mom had kept his number, tucked away like a backup plan. I sat in my car outside Jerry's all-night diner for 10 minutes before working up the nerve to go in. It was pushing 11 p.m., but Ray had answered on the first ring and named the spot without hesitation. When I walked in, the fluorescent lights made everything look slightly unreal, like I was stepping into an Edward Hopper painting with worse coffee. Ray sat in the back booth, looking exactly like I remembered, but with more gray at his temples. Same sharp eyes, same way of watching everything without seeming to stare. He had a cup of black coffee and another waiting across the table. "Jason," he nodded as I slid into the booth. "Been a while. Thanks for meeting me, Uncle Ray." The vinyl seat squeaked under me. "I wasn't sure you'd want to. Estrangement from your father doesn't mean indifference to family." He took a slow sip of coffee. "Tell me what's happening." So I did. Laid it all out. The wedding. The power plays. The gradual lockout from accounts I'd managed for decades. Ray didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. Just listened, and occasionally made notes on a small pad with a mechanical pencil. When I finished, he set down his cup with the precision of someone used to measuring their moves. "Here's what most people miss about control," he said. "It's not about power. It's about consent. Pull the consent. The whole house of cards drops." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Your stepmother's got legal authority, sure, but authority requires proper procedure." He tapped his pencil on the pad. "We need to check 3 things: elder abuse patterns, prior restraining orders, and notarization schedules. People like her usually have a history, and they usually get sloppy when they think they've won." My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos I'd taken of the power of attorney and property deed changes. Ray studied them, his expression sharpening. "See these margins?" He pointed to the document edges. "Inconsistent spacing. And the notary stamps placement. It's amateur hour. They rushed this." He looked up at me. "You said she's pushing for will changes? Within the next 30 days, from what I overheard. Then we've got our timeline." He ripped a page from his notepad and started writing. "I need you to dig into her background. Previous marriages, legal filings, anything that shows a pattern. Focus on cases involving older men and financial transfers." The neon open sign flickered outside, casting alternating shadows across our coffee cups. Ray slid the list across the laminate table surface. "Meet me back here at dawn with whatever you find." He pulled out a basic flip phone. "My number. Burner phone. Untraceable. Don't save it in your regular contacts." I pocketed the phone number, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Or maybe just its harder-edged cousin, determination. The diner's wall clock clicked to midnight as Ray stood up. "One more thing," he said, dropping cash on the table for our coffee. "Document everything from here on out. Every conversation, every moved asset. Building a case is like building a wall, one solid brick at a time." I spent the next 3 days living on coffee and courthouse Wi-Fi. You ever notice how public records smell like dust and secrets? Trust me, after hour 12 hunched over a terminal, you start philosophizing about weird things like that. Ray had given me a crash course in database searching. Taught me tricks about maiden names, county crossroads, and finding breadcrumbs in property transfers. "People leave patterns," he'd said, "even when they think they're being clever." He wasn't wrong. The first hit came from Cedar County, about 60 miles north. Marriage license: Patricia Ann Walker, her maiden name, to Gerald Thompson, age 68, wealthy real estate developer, recently widowed. Sound familiar? I could practically hear the same honey-dripped promises she'd used on Dad. "Look at the timeline," Ray pointed out, tapping the screen. "Marriage, then power of attorney within 3 months, then, boom. Restraining order filed by the family." My stomach clenched. What happened? Classic playbook. Started with organizing his finances, then isolated him from family. Tried pushing through asset transfers until his daughter caught on and filed for emergency intervention. Ray scrolled through the docket entries. Court agreed there was a pattern of undue influence, but that wasn't all. 2 counties over, we found Herbert Miller, age 71. Different name on the marriage certificate. She'd gone by Patricia Mills that time, but same story. Wealthy widower, Quick marriage, faster power grab. That one ended with both a restraining order and a stern judicial warning about predatory behavior targeting vulnerable seniors. Jesus, I muttered, staring at the case summaries. It's like reading a template. Because it is, Ray said. He'd circled a phrase that appeared in both files. Will modifications within 30 days of obtaining power of attorney. She's refined her technique, gets control, then races to lock in the changes before anyone can react. My hands were shaking as I pulled up Dad's email. There it was, sent yesterday. Will updates. Availability. In a draft to local notary James Whitman. The same one who'd rubber-stamped her power of attorney forms. You know that moment when puzzle pieces snap together and suddenly show you exactly how screwed you are? Yeah. That hit me like a freight train. I grabbed the whiteboard marker from my desk and wrote 30 days in big black letters. Below it, I started the countdown. 29. Each number felt like a hammer blow. We need to move fast, Ray said, gathering printouts of the docket numbers and case files. These prior restraining orders give us grounds for emergency filing. But judges don't like waiting until the damage is done. I nodded, already pulling up the county courthouse schedule. I can get the paperwork started tomorrow morning. First window's at 6. Good. Ray's voice had the calm precision of someone who'd fought these battles before. Start your affidavit tonight. Focus on the pattern. How her behavior mirrors these previous cases. Every detail matters. I set my phone alarm for 6 a.m., then added a second one for 5:45, just to be safe. The whiteboard number, 29 days, seemed to pulse in my peripheral vision. One more thing, Ray said, sliding a business card across my desk. My old law partner. He specializes in elder abuse cases. Call him first thing. Tell him I sent you. I picked up the card. Remembered Mom telling me once that Ray had been the cautious brother, the one who planned 3 steps ahead. Now I knew why Dad had pushed him away. Ray could spot a con coming from miles off. We've got her dead to rights, Ray said, his eyes on the case files. She just doesn't know it yet. The marker squeaked as I drew a red circle around the number 29. Each previous case had taken months to resolve. But we didn't have months. Whatever we were going to do, it had to happen fast. I started organizing the printouts. Docket numbers, marriage certificates, restraining order summaries. The evidence of her pattern was all there in black and white, just waiting to be presented to a judge. I hit the courthouse steps at 7:45 the next morning, manila folder thick with everything we'd found. You ever notice how government buildings always smell the same? Like old paper and floor wax mixed with anxiety. The security guard gave my folder the side eye as it went through the scanner. Family court's 3rd floor, he said, barely looking up. The elevator creaked its way up, and I caught my reflection in the brushed steel doors. Tired eyes, wrinkled shirt, hair that screamed, up all night. Well, at least I looked the part of someone filing an emergency petition. Remember how I said I knew every number in Dad's business? Turns out tracking dirty money and elder abuse patterns aren't so different. Both leave paper trails if you know where to look. I'd organized everything chronologically. The power of attorney, property deed transfers, bank access changes, then the bombshells, certified copies of her previous marriages, and the restraining orders that followed. The clerk's counter was empty except for a young woman wrestling with a copy machine. Her nameplate read, Andrea Martinez. Emergency restraining order petition, I said, sliding the folder across. Elder abuse case. She flipped through the first few pages, and I saw her eyebrows lift at the prior case summaries. This is comprehensive. There's a pattern, I explained. Same tactics, different victims. Now she's targeting my father. Andrea's fingers flew across her keyboard. Judge Wilson has an opening Friday at 9. She glanced up. But you'll need authenticated evidence. Everything. The judge doesn't mess around with preliminary hearings. My throat tightened. What exactly needs authentication? Court-certified copies of those prior cases. Notarized affidavits supporting your claims. Property records with official seals. She handed me a yellow checklist. If anything's missing or can't be verified, the petition dies right there. 3 days. We had 3 days to get everything certified, notarized, and bulletproof. I stepped out to the hallway and called Ray. How'd it go? He asked. Friday at 9. But we need everything authenticated. Certified copies, notarized statements, the works. Good. That's actually perfect. Ray's voice had that steady confidence I needed right then. I've got contacts at both courthouses where her previous cases were filed. They can expedite the certified copies. I leaned against the wall, heart still racing. What about the property records? County Recorder's office opens at 8. Get down there with ID and case numbers. They'll stamp everything official while you wait. I pulled out my legal pad and started mapping it out. One more thing, Ray added. Get statements from any witnesses who've seen her isolation tactics. Staff, neighbors, anyone. The more voices backing up the pattern, the better. I thought of Maria, our housekeeper who'd quit after stepmother started reorganizing the staff schedule, and old Mr. Peterson next door, who'd mentioned how Dad never came by to chat anymore. I'm on it, I said, already adding names to my list. Good. Now get moving. Clock's ticking. I hung up and checked my watch. County Recorder's office would open in 20 minutes, just enough time to grab coffee and organize my document requests. The courthouse cafe was empty except for a tired-looking bailiff. While the ancient coffee maker sputtered, I reviewed the yellow checklist. Each line item felt like another hurdle, another chance for this whole thing to fall apart if we missed anything. My coffee tasted like metal, or maybe that was just the adrenaline. Either way, my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I arranged the files in order of priority. One shot at this hearing. One chance to stop her before the will changes locked in. The recorder's office would be first, then calls to raise contacts at the other courthouses. After that, tracking down witnesses and getting their statements notarized. Every minute counted now. I drained the last of my coffee, grabbed my files, and headed for the elevator. The metal taste in my throat wasn't going away, but that didn't matter. We had 3 days to build an airtight case, and I wasn't about to let a single detail slip through the cracks. Ever pulled 2 all-nighters in a row? Not the college kind where you're cramming formulas. I mean the kind where every paper, every stamp, every signature could make or break your case. That's what those 48 hours felt like with Ray. We started at the county recorder's office Tuesday morning. The clerk there knew Ray. Turns out he'd been requesting property records for 30 years as a paralegal. While she processed our deed transfer copies, Ray walked me through his system. Color code everything, he said, pulling tabs from his briefcase. Blue for financial documents, red for prior cases, yellow for witness statements. Judges appreciate organization. I'd brought 3 empty binders, but we filled 5 by the end. The power of attorney papers went first, followed by screenshots of blocked bank access and property deed changes. Then came the jewelry gift receipts, including Mom's sapphire necklace, which still made my jaw clench. Focus, Ray reminded me, seeing my hands shake. The emotion's good fuel, but the judge needs facts. Wednesday was a blur of driving between courthouses. The clerk at Superior Court recognized stepmother's name from a 2019 case. Same story, different victim. By afternoon, we had certified copies of both prior restraining orders. Look at this language, Ray said, highlighting sections. Systematic isolation from family and friends. Aggressive reorganization of financial assets. It's like she's working from a playbook. We set up in Ray's garage that night, spreading everything across his workbench. The fluorescent shop light hummed overhead as we assembled exhibits and practiced our presentation. What about the witness statements? I asked, checking our timeline. Maria's affidavit is strong, Ray said. A housekeeper seeing the isolation tactics firsthand? Gold. And Mr. Peterson's statement about your dad's withdrawal from neighbors fills in the pattern. The hardest part was crafting the narrative. We needed to show the judge this wasn't just family drama. It was a calculated scheme with documented precedent. Ray made me rehearse key points until my throat was raw. When the judge asks about relevance, he quizzed. The prior cases establish a pattern of elder exploitation through identical methods: power of attorney, asset redistribution, and social isolation. And if they challenge witness credibility, first-hand observations from household staff and neighbors, documented in sworn affidavits, corroborate the behavioral changes consistent with financial exploitation. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the courthouse with our exhibit binder. The clerk, Andrea from Monday, looked impressed at the tabs and organization. Judge Wilson appreciates thoroughness, she said, logging each exhibit. But watch the hearsay. Stick to documented facts and direct observations. Any other advice? I asked. She glanced around before lowering her voice. Get here early tomorrow. Judge Wilson starts precisely at 9, and she notices everything. I barely slept that night. The couch in my apartment felt like concrete, and I didn't bother changing clothes. Every time I dozed off, I'd jolt awake thinking I'd missed something crucial. The lawn sprinklers started their pre-dawn hiss at 5:30. I was already up, reviewing exhibit tabs one last time. The courthouse opened at 7. By 7:15, I was sitting on one of those cold wooden benches outside courtroom 3, watching fluorescent lights flicker to life. Ray arrived at 8:00 with coffee and a final pep talk. Remember, he said, you're not just protecting your father, you're stopping a predator before she finds her next victim. I nodded, too wired to speak. The binder sat heavy in my lap as court staff began trickling in. Each click of heels on tile, each squeak of the heavy doors made my heart jump. But beneath the nerves was something solid. The weight of evidence, the strength of preparation, the certainty of truth. At 8:45, the bailiff unlocked the courtroom doors. The fluorescent hum seemed louder inside, bouncing off wooden panels and empty benches. Ray and I took our seats in the front row, exhibit binder ready, waiting for 9 o'clock to arrive. At exactly 9, Judge Wilson swept in, a tall woman with steel-rimmed glasses and perfect posture. The gallery rose, and my knees felt watery. Case number 2023 CV 4891, petition for emergency restraining order, the clerk announced. Delaney versus Delaney. I approached the podium with our binder while Ray stood beside me, his presence steady as a wall. The judge flipped through our pre-filed exhibits, her expression unchanging. Mr. Delaney, she said, explain why this requires emergency intervention. Ray had drilled me for this moment. I kept my voice level, focusing on facts rather than the anger that still burned in my chest. Your Honor, my stepmother has obtained power of attorney over my father's assets through questionable means. She's systematically isolated him from family and begun transferring properties into her controlled trust. Most critically, she's rushing to modify his will within the next 30 days. The judge's eyes narrowed. And the relevance of these prior cases? They demonstrate an established pattern, Your Honor. I gestured to the red-tabbed section. 2 previous marriages to older men, both ending in restraining orders after similar financial maneuvers. Same timeline, same methods. Power of attorney, asset transfers, rushed will modifications. Judge Wilson turned to the exhibits. These property transfers. Explain the consent issues. Ray stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may address capacity and consent? At her nod, he continued. The power of attorney was executed during a celebration with alcohol present. Subsequent property transfers occurred without independent legal counsel, and Mr. Delaney Sr. has been increasingly isolated from financial advisors who've managed his affairs for decades. Ms. Stafford, the judge addressed stepmother's counsel. Your response to these allegations? The young attorney shuffled papers. Your Honor, these are merely family disagreements over estate management. The prior cases are irrelevant. Irrelevant? Judge Wilson cut in. Counsel, I'm looking at 3 cases with nearly identical fact patterns. Explain how your client obtained power of attorney while serving champagne, then immediately began transferring assets to her control. The transfers were for estate efficiency, the same efficiency cited in the 2019 Peterson case. The judge held up a highlighted page. Before that restraining order was granted? Stepmother's attorney faltered. Your Honor, my client, I've heard enough. Judge Wilson's pen scratched across a form. I'm granting the emergency restraining order. The respondent is barred from the estate and prohibited from executing any further financial transactions pending a full hearing. We'll set that for 2 weeks from today. She signed with a flourish. Bailiff, please escort Ms. Delaney from the property if she's present. Next case. My legs felt hollow as we walked outside. A deputy was already heading toward his cruiser, restraining order in hand. Ray clapped my shoulder. Well done, son. Let's follow him out there. We drove behind the deputy's car through familiar streets. When we turned onto the estate's long drive, I saw the gardeners pause their work. Clippers frozen mid-hedge. The deputy parked near the front steps and strode to the wrought iron gate, official papers in hand. Father appeared on the veranda as the deputy posted the order. Even from the car, I could see his face change as he read. Confusion, then dawning comprehension. He seemed to shrink somehow, his shoulders pulling in as the weight of it hit him. All those documents he'd signed, all those efficient changes she'd made, now they looked less like trust and more like liability. Mrs. Henderson from next door stopped at her mailbox watching. She'd been friends with Mom for 20 years. I saw her pull out her phone as she walked back up her drive and knew the whispers were already starting. By dinner, half the neighborhood would know. I got out of the car and walked to the old oak tree Mom had loved. Its shade felt cool and solid as I watched the deputy's cruiser pull away. Stepmother in the back seat. She sat rigid, staring straight ahead, but I caught the flash of fury in her eyes as they passed. Under the oak's branches, I pulled out my phone and called Ray. You doing okay? He asked. Yeah. I watched Father retreat inside, the screen door banging hollow behind him. What's our next move? We'll need to secure the estate documents first thing tomorrow. Then start untangling those property transfers. Ray paused. One step at a time, Jason. We've got the momentum now. The next 2 weeks hit like a tsunami of paperwork. Every morning brought fresh invoices, attorney fees, and management expenses that Father had approved without reading. I spent hours cataloging transfers while Ray's team traced where each dollar had wandered. Look at this, I said one morning, sliding a statement across my desk. $3,000 for estate consultation from a company that doesn't exist. Ray whistled low. Add it to the pile. The auditors want everything. Speaking of auditors, they camped in Father's study like archaeologists, digging through layers of financial debris. Every few hours, one would emerge with more questions about missing documentation or irregular payments. Father aged a year each day, shrinking into his chair as they dissected his signatures. I trusted her judgment, he kept saying, voice thin and lost. She said it was more efficient. The efficiency myth crumbled fast. By week's end, we had a clear picture. Nearly 40% of the estate's liquid assets had evaporated into consulting fees, luxury purchases, and creative accounting. The retirement cushion Father had built from decades of oil changes and transmission repairs, gone. Remember that social circle stepmother had cultivated? Turns out country club memberships get awkward when restraining orders go public. Mrs. Henderson's phone tree worked overtime, and soon every bridge club and garden society had copies of the court records. You ever watch reputation die in real time? It's like watching ice melt, slow at first, then all at once. Did you hear about the Peterson case? I overheard at the grocery store. Same thing she pulled in Riverside. Vendors started calling to update their records. The catering company that handled her famous dinner parties, booked solid through next year. That boutique she frequented, suddenly implementing appointment-only shopping. Even her yoga instructor found a scheduling conflict. Have you ever seen someone try to maintain their social position while their oxygen gets cut off? She attempted damage control at first. Calls, texts, explanations. But people who trade in influence know when the well runs dry. Her carefully curated world didn't just exclude her, it erased her. Father faced his own isolation. Friends who'd warned him about rushing into marriage now avoided eye contact at the bank. Business associates suddenly remembered urgent appointments when he called. The auto shop's longtime customers started taking their cars to other mechanics, not wanting to get caught in the undertow. I found him one evening, staring at Mom's portrait in the hallway. I should have listened, he said quietly. To you, to Ray, to everyone. His hand trembled as he straightened the frame. Your mother would be so disappointed in me. That hit hard. But watching him shuffle to his room, shoulders bowed under the weight of consequences, I realized something. Sometimes the hardest lessons leave the deepest roots. Speaking of roots, I had one last task. The garden center had called. My special order was ready. The oak sapling wasn't much to look at, maybe 3 feet tall in its pot. But its root ball was solid. Mom always said you judge a tree by its foundation, not its height. I carried it to her old garden, now cleared of stepmother's attempted improvements. The soil still held memory. Decades of Mom's careful tending. Her quiet hours nursing seedlings and training vines. My knees cracked as I knelt, trowel in hand. The hole took shape slowly. Each scoop of earth released that deep, clean scent Mom loved. Sweat trickled down my neck as I worked, but the morning sun felt right on my shoulders. When the depth looked good, I unwrapped the root ball and settled it gentle as a sleeping child. Good soil filled the gaps. I packed it careful but firm, the way Mom taught me. The burlap wrap went around the trunk, protection until it found its strength. As I watered it slow and steady, letting each pore soak deep, my hands came away smelling like earth and possibility. Standing back, brushing dirt from my knees, I studied that small tree. Its leaves caught sunlight like tiny hands reaching for sky. The front door stood quiet behind me, its brass handle warm in the morning light. All those years of ledgers and calculations, and here was the simplest math. Respect, like a tree, grows from what you earn, not what you take.